Where do you feel anxiety, please?
I would say the biggest part would be
I mean, in your anatomy, yeah.
yeah, in my chest. Like, I just feel like there's something just gripping my heart, gripping my chest at times. I mean, I feel it in my stomach as well. But I would say the biggest one is here. It feels like it's usually a little bit harder to breathe. Maybe someone's sitting there.
You had pretty rough childhood, am I right in saying?
Yep.
Just give me a little bit of an overview for the purposes of this.
Of course. We actually met there. I was, during my very important formative years, I was living in Skid Row at a shelter. We were there for a year, then we went to a transitional home, and then we went back. And then after that, there was a series of moving into my family's friends' places where we were just sleeping on the floor, dealing with creeps, you know. And then after that, I lived with my father for a year where he was a drug dealer, and we were still also hopping place to place. And I was suddenly just away from everyone, friends and family, because we'd moved far. So
you've lived a life of extreme trauma and suffering is what you've just described, of like almost an unimaginable degree. So you're not mad, you know what I mean? If you didn't feel fear, like is another word for anxiety, fear, then that would be really unusual, given the quantity and severity of suffering that you've encountered. So when I'm looking at this, it's hard almost, I would say, Cheri, to begin at the point of the anxiety, because in a sense the anxiety is there to serve you, because one can imagine that your inner cosmology, your inner ecology must be set to shit's going to go down, something's going to go wrong, be extremely cautious, trust nobody. Like your life has taught you this.
yeah, actually, yes. I mean, I feel like lately it's been a lot easier in terms of like finally having a foundation. But at the back of my mind every time is it didn't work out for 19 years. You think it's going to work out now?
How old are you?
23.
Oh, cool. So perhaps we could look at for a moment, I reckon, instead of anxiety, of that great catalogue of difficult and traumatic circumstances and conditions that you just described, is there something in there that we could focus on? For example, like I don't know, my family because I grew up under these conditions, or the state because they didn't provide me with a necessary degree of security. Do you think that there's something like that we could, like, say when we're just talking about this now, mate, what person, place or thing do you think is the biggest contributor to us arriving at the destination of anxiety?
I would feel it would be the shelter. I'm obsessed with control, and I had none of it there. There was
Who
no
do you
help.
blame for you being in that shelter?
Quite a few people.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, I guess starting with my parents.
Yeah, I feel like this might be a good way to go, you know, because like sometimes I'm resentful of my parents because like I maybe didn't get a good enough like Scalextrics, which is a car racing kit that you can have as a kid. So, you know, had they not provided me with a home, I feel like that could only have made that resentment worse. So, okay, so my parents, because I grew up in a shelter where I felt unsafe and afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Does that describe it enough, or do you want me to put it in different words?
No, I feel like that one covers it pretty well.
Parents, I grew up in a shelter where I felt... Now, like, remember, we're dealing with a step 4. In your case, a step 4 is going to have to cover multitude of facets and aspects to a very challenging and difficult life. So we're just dealing with one aspect of it. We're dealing with your parents. You know, you've already indicated that there's sort of a degree of drug dealing and criminality and some negligence in other areas. And one of the bit where you said there were creeps around, that's like a chilling thing to contemplate for a moment. But just for now, let's just deal with this. I grew up in a shelter where I didn't feel safe. And the reason I'm suggesting that, Cheri, is because the anxiety when I consider your circumstances seems like a sensible response. Like it's like your deal is, well, I'm going to have to be cautious.
I'm bracing myself every time.
I'm not surprised, mate. So like, when we look at the third column, my parents, because I grew up in a shelter where I didn't feel safe, does this affect your pride? What you think others think of you?
It really did.
Yeah, well, because you're going to school and you're living in a homeless shelter and stuff.
Yeah, I was 12 and no one knew.
Wow.
I was pretty good at keeping that tightly wrapped.
Yeah. So you must be a very self-sufficient woman. Okay, so your pride is affected. Your self-esteem, what you feel about yourself.
No, it doesn't affect that.
What do you feel about yourself?
Most cases I feel self-assured, you know. I know that I'm very capable.
You are. That's quite clear. What about this anxiety, though? What do you think that the fear is? The fear is a sense, in a way, that there is something that needs to be addressed, you know, and that possibly, potentially, that we're not sufficiently resourced to deal with whatever this threat is, you know? So how do you think this idea of anxiety plays into the self-esteem? And thank you for discussing this, by the way, in this situation.
Of course. I would say that, again, just because I'm not used to things working out, and it's like my body has this fight or flight response regarding anything. So whenever even just the smallest of tasks happens, whether it's talking to someone or, you know, even doing this, I'll bunch up, even though I know that the rational side of me is, Cheri, you have this, you know what you're going to talk about, you're around supportive people, you'll be fine. And for some reason, I still can't, you know, get rid of shaking or, you know, being able to eat in preparation for it. I'm not exactly sure where it's coming from. I do my best to, like, I'll write lists just to figure out a situation. And it's mind-boggling how I can't find it.
Seems to be that you're doing extraordinarily well and haven't put yourself together. Let's face it, a lot of people that experience that kind of early life don't make it this far. People commit suicide, people do drugs. You don't need me to tell you that because you've lived it, and for me, I've just looked at it. So, like, for me, though, when we're discussing the idea of anxiety, it seems to me that self-esteem, what I think of myself, I'm not telling you that you don't think that you're a great person, because you are. Just from on the basis of what you've achieved, distance travelled, you know, that's an incredible thing to have overcome those kind of circumstances. But it feels to me that part of the anxiety is a sense that but like, I think the fear itself is reason enough to consider self-esteem as an area to mark.
I believe so, yeah. There is a lot of times where even at the end, I know I'm fine, but at the same time, I'm not enough.
Yeah.
That word comes out a lot. I'm not enough for this.
This is pretty cool because, like, remember, like, I'm not trying to guide you towards saying, like I've got low self-esteem. I'm not saying that, but we've, like, in the course of this conversation, we've discussed the anxiety that you suffer to the point where you can't eat and that you can't sleep. Now we're specifically dealing with parents, because you grew up in a shelter where you didn't feel safe, you know, and, like, so the corollary between not being able to sleep, not being able to eat, and shelter where I don't feel safe, it's like, even for a person like me who only understands life through the lens of the 12 steps and has no training in psychoanalysis or dealing with people with trauma other than dealing with it through this method, you know, it seems to me that there would be a correlation between those two things. And indeed, that a person that's not given safety, nurture and love in their early life is going to find it hard to maintain a certain level of self-esteem, even though what you've accomplished is pretty bloody incredible because you're not, you know, destitute. Well done.